Hello, welcome to another screencast where we'll be discussing this time the microanatomy of skeletal muscle, and we're going to break this into two parts here. So the first part here, hopefully you'll be able to identify and describe here the overall structure of what a skeletal muscle is, and so define the muscle. These structures called fascicles, and some diagrams are called fasciculi, and then what a fiber is, and those are the cells. Then looking at the connective tissue membranes that are associated with that, the fascia, the epimysium, the paramysium, and the endomysium. The relationships between the above, right, so these things, and then the relationship to what a tendon is. And then talk a little bit briefly here about the vascularization, so this is the blood supply to muscles, and then the innervation of those, and that is the neuromuscular junction, or the nervous system connecting to these skeletal muscles. Right? So again, this is kind of the gross microanatomy, so the larger scale stuff of the of that anatomy. So let's get started here. Here we see a bone, and then the muscle is connected to the bone via the tendon. And again, that tendon is dense, regular connective tissue, mostly collagen fibers. Right? Then this tendon becomes continuous with the outer covering the outer body of the muscle that is not shown on this diagram but is shown on the next one, and that outer covering is known as fascia. Right? So the fascia is this outer connective tissue membrane then that is continuous with this tendon. Just deep to the fascia, so if you were to slice through this, you would then see the next connective tissue layer, the epimysium. Epi meaning upon, and mys, muscle, so literally upon the muscle. Then if we continue to cut into that muscle, we would see then bundles of muscle fibers. So I think on a previous screencast we had seen here that the muscle fibers is another name for a cell. Right? So the muscle fiber is a cell, right, in skeletal muscle. And it's a fiber again because it's long and thin. These cells are long and thin. So here we've pulled out one muscle fiber or muscle cell. If we take a bunch of those muscle cells, those muscle fibers, and group them together, we get what is known as a fascicle, right, or a fasciculus. And so that fascicle is wrapped by a connective tissue layer that is called the paramysium. Right? Peri meaning around, so this goes around the fascicles. Right? Then those fascicles are all bundled together with that epimysium, and then surrounding the epimysium is then going to be the fascia. Now, what's not shown on this diagram is that around each muscle fiber there is another connective tissue layer known as the endomysium. The endomysium, endo within, and again, muscle here. And then lastly, what we'll show you here is that there is highly vascularized here. These blood vessels are embedded anywhere between the epimysium there and then the paramysium that goes around the fascicles. Okay. Oh, here we go. So here, this is, sorry, I didn't see this here. This is the endomysium that's, again, between the fibers, right, or around each individual muscle fiber. So let's take a look at another diagram of this from another text, and sort of work our way down. Again, I'm trying not to look up here at these labels, right? So going from outside to in, first we're going to see that this is the fascia, then we're going to see epimysium, and then we're going to see paramysium here that goes around the fascicle. So we're identifying that this is a fascicle here, and here's another fascicle, right? And then the fascicles are bunches of individual muscle fibers. So that's a muscle cell, muscle fiber, muscle cell, etc. And then the light blue here, well, what is surrounding each of those muscle fibers is then the endomysium. Right? And so again, I think if you come back up here and practice this, you'll see that you'll be able to do that then with some practice. Right? And again, here I want to show you just that the arteries, the nerves, and the veins, right, so this is the vascularization is embedded in this endomysium that's here. And again, we see arteries and we see veins, and then the yellow are the nerves. Right? And so these nerves then continue to branch and innervate down all the way here to the individual muscle fibers. So now we've pulled out one fascicle here and I've pulled out 1, 2, 3 muscle fibers or 3 muscle cells, and we see that that there's again endomysium that's surrounding those fibers. Here I've pulled out a thin little capillary, and this makes sense because the oxygen is going to be leaving those capillaries, right? Carbon dioxide going to be getting into those capillaries because these cells are doing aerobic respiration very highly muchly when they are actively contracting, which we'll get to a little bit later. What I want to point out to you here before we leave this slide then is that the nerve here is branching, and this is one, sorry, no longer a nerve, now this is one neuron. So here is the synapse down here of that neuron with this muscle fiber, right? So I've got a neuron and a muscle cell coming together at that synapse, and again here is the neuromuscular junction, or the NMJ. Okay, so you are expected to be able to dissect a muscle here and identify all those pieces and parts of the gross microscopic anatomy of a muscle there. We do have slides like this available in the back, and I would encourage you to take a look at them. These are what the individual skeletal muscle fibers are going to look like. You can see the striations. The striations here, right? Then what you also see is the axon. Here's the axon coming down, and then these are the motor end plates, or the axon terminals, that are hooked up to this cell. So I've got this, here's the big axon coming down, and then this axon is going to branch into individual little branches here, and you get little motor end plate that's going to be innervating or attached via some connective tissue right to these individual myofibers. Myofibers, again, the muscle cells themselves. So do take a look at that under the scope. We have it in the back, and again here, again, is another couple images of, again, the motor end plates right here. So this is the axon terminal on that muscle fiber, and here we see it kind of being pulled away just a little bit, just to indicate to you that there is a little bit of connective tissue that's holding this neuron axon terminal to the skeletal muscle fiber right here, okay, the skeletal muscle cell. So that was a quick tour here of the overall structure, including these anatomical features of the skeletal muscle. The connective tissue membranes were discussed there. Didn't quite hit the relationship to the tendons there. I'll get to that in class. I did mention that vascularization, and again the innervation there at the neuromuscular junction. Okay, thanks for listening. Bring your questions to class.